let me continue with the slides. And there will be quite a lot of the topics that you guys were asking about, that you're confused about. We'll be touching on all of those topics in the course, and quite a few of them actually today. So let me get started on that part. So first of all, many people, when you say business continuity, they think two things plus COVID. So the first thing that everybody thinks about is, if there's anything to do with the building or the site, and some of you are coming from the oil and gas industry, some of you are coming from banks or from insurance companies. So for some of you, the building is an office. For others, the building is an entire plant. But that whole focus on if the building is not there, that tends to be the historic kind of focus of business continuity. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying generally that's what all the plans that I get confronted with, what they're usually all about. The other thing that they're all about is ICT. So the IT, can work continuously. And if there's any problems with the IT, what do we do? If it's downtime, if the data center is experiencing some sort of problems, so that tends to be the focus of those plans. And then for years, I've been telling people, don't just focus on those two things. Focus on, for example, your staff or your supply chain, because they can also be disrupted. It's not always going to be just the building on the IT. Now, for years and years, I've been asking people to make pandemic plans with us, to help us during exercises, to use pandemic scenarios, for example. And people were always looking at me, especially in modern sort of countries, big cities with good hygiene. They would look at me like, why would we plan for that? That will never happen, And as you can see, we now have COVID-19 on our hands, and it's certainly been a response for many organizations that I've worked with, that if they did have the plan and if they thought about it a little bit, it had made their life a lot easier. So I'm going to bring up some other scenarios for you, because it's not going to be just about COVID. It's not going to be just about the building or IT. There's other scenarios that you can think about. When it comes to making business continuity plans, some of these other incidents or threats may be relevant to you as well. For example, cybercrime or hacking. That's not the same as a flooded data center. It's not the same as the IT applications failing because there's some inconsistency or corruption of data. There's a number of other events that can cause this kind of situation. And one of those events is something to do with your cybersecurity. Now, as we've seen with many organizations having to deal with cybersecurity incidents, the process of dealing with it is very different from dealing with a process like a data center being down for other reasons like fire or flood, etc. The assessment alone on knowing what actually is the cause of the problem, when you're talking about information security, can I just even bring up the issue of things like ransomware. Ransomware was in nobody's risk matrix until it first came out, until it first happened to an organization. It never even was in the realm of experience of anyone. So in your risk management process, you try to think about the things that may go wrong, and in the cybersecurity space, and also sometimes in the physical security space, you find that there's a lot of surprises. And that's what I guess security people are really good at, is to think along the lines of what people might be up to that we don't know yet. Now, that's very different from planning, for example, for a power failure, which is also down the bottom there, if you can see the chart on the screen. Power outages, we can kind of predict what that looks like. How can we prepare for it? What can we set up in terms of diesel generator backups? What can we actually do in terms of the notification? And knowing what the impacts will be. That's a very known area, because it's happened in many countries and many cities where we did have power failures, including KL, where I've worked a lot as well, and also Brunei. From time to time, not so much Brunei, but on Borneo itself. I've actually worked in other cities like Kuching, etc., and I know that power failure is a potential, that could happen. So you can see there's scenarios on here where you know roughly what it looks like, others that are very much question mark. Another example I'd like to highlight there is not an evacuation exercise or an evacuation scenario. Like when there's a building issue, like an explosion or fire or flood, etc., we always think, we need an evacuation plan. Now, there's two things with that. One is, yes, of course you do, but it could be that it's happening at a moment where staff are still traveling into the office, for example, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, you need an evacuation plan, but you also need a plan for redirecting staff, because staff are not all going to be in the same place necessarily when something happens. An explosion or fire or flood could happen in a strange time of the day, like I said, when people are traveling into the office, or when half the staff are already left, for example. Yeah, and this is in a time where COVID is all gone and we're all working in the office again. So you also have remote workers, you know. So if half the staff were working from an office and then there's a security incident outside or some sort of safety incident like a chemical spill, staff could be locked inside the office, or you want them to stay inside because that's safer than going outside. Now that's a whole different scenario. We call that a shelter in place type scenario. So I'm just trying to initiate in you a couple of new thoughts around business continuity planning. It's not all going to be about an evacuation or a data center that goes down. There's other things that might happen. Now, COVID-19, the flu outbreak scenario is on there as well, as you can see, you know, fire, of course. Denial of building access is interesting. I do a lot of work in Africa, and they are very much concerned about protests. You know, so if there's some sort of political related protest or something, you know, that's actually something that really disrupts the ability of staff to enter a site or their offices. So you can see that's also a very valid scenario. And then we've got scenarios like phone system failure. Many people think, it's all about the IT, and most ICT systems are now running, most voice systems are now running over ICT, like VoIP type systems. It's all one thing. Well, my experience is when you can still speak to customers or counterparts or government entities, and you can still pick up the phone, you can still at least maintain your reputation as a company. You know, so you can actually still make sure that you can communicate with people, even if your IT is down, even if your building is down or your staff are ill. You know, having the ability to have voice communication in place is actually a very, very important thing. So phone system failure and having backups for that, some sort of alternate way to communicate quickly, is very, very critical for most organizations. And the final one I'd like to highlight there is a supplier being down. You know, you have scenarios where you're fine, your building is fine, your staff are fine, your ICT is fine, you know, there's no impact happening there, but one of your key suppliers is out of action. They're flooded, or they're experiencing something like COVID, or they're experiencing something like an IT failure or communication failure. And those sorts of things actually can disrupt a business, but also an entire industry. So supply chain business continuity is a really interesting field, especially for organizations within your group, organizations like Shell, you know, the petroleum, oil and gas industry, because it's an enormous complex supply chain where there's upstream as well as downstream suppliers, but what you deal with as an organization, and to understand those dependencies and understand how can we even assess what those dependencies are and how does it work? You know, if one of them is down, what alternate ways can we find to actually work, well, to still towards the same outcomes? So I know that there's also quite a lot of that kind of work happening across Indonesia and Thailand, where I've done some work through the Department of Foreign Affairs, and they're actually planning very much for that kind of supply chain risk there in certain industries. It's very complex. It requires usually a lot of brain power together and a lot of initiative from one of the players at least. I've actually talked to Shell in the past when I was working for Shell as a contractor in the Netherlands in the ICT space. We actually talked a lot about Shell should initiate some of those discussions about where are the single points of failure in the supply chain, because Shell is such a big party in some of that oil and gas industry. So yeah, so that's something you can think about. Now, in the financial sector, like insurance and banking, etc., you can see in the digital world also very much a supply chain. You know, you've got smaller financial entities that rely a lot on your bank, for example. There's insurance companies that work with brokers, where the brokers are very reliant on you as an insurance company working because they're selling your product, or the other way around, you know. So if they're suddenly down, you're affected as an insurance company. So I just wanted to highlight some of those examples, and especially in that industry of banking and insurance, the supply chain information security is another very important part. But actually, for all industries, that could be now a very important focus. There's a separate standard about information security in the supply chain that's called ISO 28000. It's a variation on the 27000 standard. It's a sub kind of, I should say, a side street, you know, into that specific supply chain security part. Because you can imagine a lot of organizations that work together, that order products from each other, or that manage each, together they manage a part of the supply chain. They also look at each other's systems sometimes. They're plugging into each other's systems. I know quite a lot of advanced organizations, including Shell, who actually have interlinkage with other organizations' financial systems or IT systems, logistical systems, and you can see the complex situation there. So, I see something is happening, blocking the presentation. Let me see if I can do something about that. Can you guys see something happening here with some screenshots that are happening? Please type in the chat if this is resolving your problem. I think the problem might be that I had the participant screen open, which I will now, let me restart that. Great. If you can let me know if this made a difference to you, where you could actually see the screen better this time. All right, so here's a few screenshots there from actual events that have happened. You can see there one of the events being a diesel tanker catching fire along a highway. Now, this kind of thing can make a massive breakdown in logistical processes in organizations if they're transporting things over that particular highway. You can see the major impact and how long it would take to actually resolve that problem. And these are some examples from your region, by the way, so please let us know if you recognize them. You could type in the chat if you like. Very much welcome that. You can see a KTMB cargo train derailing at the Tanjung Malim station. You know, there's also quite a big impact. Train derailments can cause a lot of issues too. And once again, because of the duration of fixing some of these problems and the knock-on effects on certain industries. And Marion, please, can you type if that screen blocking now is gone? Because I'm certainly flicking through some of these new boxes now, so hopefully that will resolve it. Now, some interesting challenges here related to terrorist attacks. You know, really big impact also on the human side of things, you know, and on human health and well-being. So sometimes you see that business continuity is actually a major driver, is actually because of the corporate social responsibility too. So planning for things that can actually affect your staff in terms of their health and well-being is very important. Now, Tutong remaining on alert for more flooding. You can see also in the region where there's monsoon season starting, you know, you can see flooding as a major incident. And then there's, you can see here, due to COVID-19, foreigners being banned from entering, including Rinske, me, you know, I wasn't able to enter. But you can see what that does to a business, you know, in terms of my business, Zenit, your own business. You know, all of us now working in a different way, stopping the travel. I'm sure that Shell had major impact from non-traveling staff, you know, because Shell would have normally a lot of people traveling around the world for certain activities. Could be maintenance, could be engineering, could be on the business side of things. And we're all reinventing our business with those limitations. So, yeah, another example here, you can find power outages in part of central Singapore caused by equipment failure at a substation. Very common problem. Large-scale impact if a substation fails. And you can see that some of your businesses may actually have very good provisions for this kind of thing. with generator power, etc. Now, another one is an actually Australian example where you see the Internet of Things. I hope that that makes sense to people what that is. The Internet of Things meaning non-IT equipment being linked to IT equipment and being dependent on that IT equipment, like, for example, lifts and water sanitation plants and all sorts of things like transport systems. Everything now relies on information security systems, and or information technology systems generally, I should say. And if there's anything with the information security in there that can actually bring down physical equipment, including an entire transport system, as you see in that example there. And here you see a very similar example which affected an entire supply chain. Well, this is actually, Maersk was actually an example from my home country, Rotterdam, in Holland, in Europe, the city of Rotterdam, which has a major European port. You find that there's some cyber attack actually affected a global shipping company. And whilst the attack was actually controlled fairly quickly, there was a knock-on effect of that particular logistical challenge for about 6 months. So you see that also in the automotive industry, I can see quite a few are from that industry as well. If you see one little part of a car not being produced because one supplier in some country which is affected by some disaster or incident, if that one part is not produced and there's no immediate alternate backup for that particular supplier, you know, there's a delay potentially. I think Toyota had a delay of 6 to 12 months in some of their supply chain as well because of one factory in Thailand being flooded a number of years ago. So supply chain continuity, as I said, it's a big challenge, but also extremely important these days to start thinking about that and start working on that challenge. And here you can see certain industries being so vulnerable to that hacking type incident. And again, this is now affecting, in this particular example, it was affecting a health industry, you know, a health system, which is a big concern because it actually immediately affects health and well-being of people, you know, of patients, etc. So a very big problem as well. Okay, DDoS attacks are another kettle of fish when we talk about cyber-related threats. You can see that there's attacks on certain websites and bringing down certain company corporate presence that they have on the web. Yeah, you can see NASA even being attacked. So nobody's really safe from any of this. So why bother having a plan? Because without it, and let me just double check. Can someone type in the chat if now the screen is visible in full and without any problems, please? So why bother having a plan? Because without it, what we find is this kind of response. And some of you may have seen this kind of slideshow before. It's a bit of a humorous thing. You know, you think it's all for fun, but what I'm trying to say here is a important message. Okay, let me re-share that screen so that we unblock this problem. I think that may have resolved it. So what you see here is a little car that ended up in the water. And, well, we're trying to resolve that by pulling it out. Great, much better, I can see from Kariman Osman. Thank you very much. So you can see here the disaster recovery or business continuity plan, I should say, was to quickly get a crane and to try and pull that car out. Now that's all looking good, but oops, that plan was not really well tested, was it? So whilst that crane came, it actually caused a bigger problem. Now we have a car and a crane in the water. Okay, let's fix that problem with another Band-Aid solution. And what you can see here is, yeah, another crane that's coming along to try and fix this issue. And it's pulling out the car, and now it's pulling out the other crane. And there you go. Now, the last one, and I hope you guys could all see it properly, but the last picture is actually a Photoshop, a fake one. But the message there is test your plans. You know, you can come up with a business continuity strategy. You can come up with all sorts of ideas. But the problem is if you don't test it and don't validate those solutions, you may find yourself in bigger issues after it actually will happen. So yeah, you can see here, band-aid solutions can also happen in a business. Like this is a bit of an analogy, of course, you know, this whole slideshow that I just showed you. But what you find is in businesses where they say, oh, okay, the IT is down, we don't have email, corporate email, we'll just tell the staff to quickly use Gmail or Hotmail or something, if that still exists, you know, like those old, you know, mail systems that are personal mail systems. So we'll all go on Gmail and the client can still receive our communication, no problem at all. Well, what you find with that is many organizations found themselves in bigger trouble because of the information security risks of Gmail. And even if that never actually became a problem and there was no information security breach on it, the perception of the customer, the perception of the recipient of your Gmail-based emails perceives that as a very insecure way to communicate. So the reputational risk on your company is big because if they suddenly see things coming from Gmail accounts, you know, with sensitive information, sensitive documents, etc., it becomes a big problem, yeah. And they will perceive your business as being not very well prepared with a good tested backup system for your emails. So sometimes it's actually better to tell other parties, partners, or clients or suppliers to say, let's wait for a few hours until we get a full-blown tested solution in place, and then you don't have that particular risk because you actually can quickly test and validate and make sure you come up with something that is actually a safe solution to use. So this is just a little analogy there, and I hope you get my point here. You know, we need to make sure it needs a tested plan. Okay, so over here we see the benefits of business continuity, even if a disaster never strikes. Some of you may think, great, we need BCP, because you work in BCP or you work in risk management, so you see the importance of this type of thing. But others around you in your organization, you know, they're not going to see it that way. They see BCP as something like a necessary evil. It distracts from making money. It distracts from doing their day-to-day work. It distracts from having their coffee and relaxing. Now someone like you, for example, wants to do this business continuity planning. And many people think, you know, we've worked through COVID. We've survived all of that stuff. We went okay with it. So really, do we need to plan for all of this? We will just work it out as we go along. You know, why do we need a plan? Now, for that, and this is a very important slide for all of you who are trying to sell or promote business continuity amongst, you know, their colleagues and their bosses and other staff around them. The first one that is really important to mention is stakeholder and client confidence. So what would it look like, for example, if you, for example, TAP, if you couldn't tell your clients and your counterparts or people around you, if you couldn't tell them, hey, if something goes wrong, we are prepared. We know what we're doing. We can actually, you know, make sure that there's no major impact. That is a very important thing to be able to do. And we see actually quite a lot of organizations putting business continuity capability statements and their ISO 22301 certification, etc. They're putting that information online on their corporate website so that clients and other stakeholders can see there's a tested and tried solution in place for business continuity. And you are there for the long run, and if an incident strikes, your business will continue. So even if never an actual disaster happens, or an incident or disruption happens to you, the confidence that you build with those customers and stakeholders is actually quite substantial. Another one is compliance. So for example, your compliance with ISO standards, with other regulations. Some of you work in the financial industry. I know that Brunei, as well as Malaysia and other central banks or regulatory authorities in your region are quite strict with business continuity. So you have to have a business continuity plan. As an insurance company or a bank, for example, you cannot just say, no, we don't bother about it, we don't care about it. Actually, it's a super important thing to be able to comply and to continue your business. You have to be able to show your compliance to those regulators. Another reason to do proper business continuity is corporate social responsibility, to make sure that your staff know that, for example, if there's a disaster, their payroll continues. They will still be kept informed. Their health and well-being is maintained, even though, I don't know, your building is flooded or your IT systems are down, that you are still able to communicate with your staff, that you still keep them safe. This is a corporate social responsibility aspect that more and more staff, especially now since COVID-19, more and more staff are starting to value that and ask questions about it from organizations. They ask, if before they apply for a job, they ask, what have you got in place if things go wrong? If it hits the fan, what actually will you be able to do for me? How will you communicate with me? What do I have to be able to work from home? What provisions do you have if I feel sick suddenly in that situation? So it's an important part of being a corporate social responsible company or organization. Another aspect there is better investment decisions. So if you do proper business continuity planning, you actually will know better what are your critical processes, your time-sensitive processes in the business. We call that business impact analysis, and we'll tackle that in step 5 of this process, actually, that I'm teaching you. So to actually be able to understand really well what are your time-critical services, what are your most critical departments, staff, IT resources, other resources, makes you able to then make better investment decisions into certain treatment options and continuity provisions. So if you don't do business continuity properly, you may knee-jerk into certain solutions. And some of you work in ICT. I've seen people set up entire real-time replication and data centers and three-way backups and all this stuff. And actually knowing the business was able to continue with manual workarounds for quite a long time. So these manual workarounds were not identified beforehand because they didn't do a business continuity end-to-end process. So they knee-jerked, if you know what I mean. They jumped to the conclusion of, oh, we need some sort of full-blown ICT, constant backup, real-time, replicated solution. Even though actually on the business side, it was clear that the business could actually deal with had other ways to continue certain activities. So it gives you the option to have proper investment and not over or under invest in certain controls and treatment options. Now, for the newbies in our group, some of you said they are very new to this field. This is gold. This list you have to keep in mind because you will get questions from people going, why would I bother with making business continuity? Or they're not motivated to come to a meeting about it. And I'm not trying to demotivate you for the actual job. I'm just saying it is very common to those who actually work in the field. And once again, please type away in the chat box if you've got those frustrations in your life when you're doing business continuity or risk management, and if you recognize some of these things that I'm sharing. So now, before we finish this list, one very super important one, and some of you work in insurance, but the actual cheaper or better business interruption insurance that organizations can try to seek when they have a better business continuity plan. Now, this is gold because this actually helps organizations to save money from day one when they make that plan. If they make a good business continuity plan and good risk management framework, most insurance companies are open to hearing about that because they know that you as a customer will be less likely to invoke your business interruption insurance if you have that kind of insurance with them. Because you've got a good business continuity plan, you can continue your work better, and therefore you will probably be less likely to put in a claim. And that saves that insurance company certain amounts of money. So we see, at least in the last, I should say in the last 6 to 8 months, I've seen 5 to 10 clients actually invoking or initiating that discussion with their insurer and being successful with that. So they're reporting back 8 to 10% discount in their premiums that they pay every year for business interruption insurance. And actually, some of them actually as much as 35 to 40% discount. And business interruption insurance is all about if something happens, the insurance company will give certain funds so that you can continue that business. So there's an immediate link with business continuity planning. I hope this all makes good sense to all of you. Yeah, this is a very important reason that you can bring up for doing business continuity planning properly. Now, the last one is, of course, general peace of mind. I mean, senior people in your business, executives, etc., they want to go to sleep at night. They don't want to have this feeling that if something were to happen overnight or they wake up in the morning and they hear that there's a major incident that happened to the IT or to the buildings or to staff. Most people want to actually be prepared in their mind to know that, hey, things will be resolved, at some stage, and that there's a plan in place. And that's what you help them do with business continuity. Now, I've put there a picture of the carrot and the stick. And I know that some of you may have heard that before, but what business continuity is all about is not just the stick saying, you must do this because of compliance, because we work in finance, so we need this plan, or other reasons for compliance. It is also about the carrot, and the carrot is some of those reasons I just gave you, things like corporate social responsibility, or things like better day-to-day business, and also cheaper business interruption insurance. So I hope this all makes sense to all of you. Okay, now I do hope this screen is not partially blocked. I hope that you can see these guys running from the bear. Now, get prepared to type something in the chat box because I have a virtual chocolate reward for the first person who answers this question. Some of you who may know me know that I'm completely hooked on chocolate, and I always, with all my events and training and conferences, chocolate is always a very big reward for everybody. So this one is going to be virtual, but I would like you to please participate in this question. So the question is, if we are all running from a bear, all of us here, how fast does everyone need to be? So how fast do you need to be if we're all running from the bear? Quick answer to earn that virtual chocolate. Faster than the bear? Mm-hmm. Now, faster than the bear could be pretty difficult. And I'm saying, as an analogy to certain disasters, it could be difficult to plan for every single bear, every single flood, fire, explosion, IT failure out there. It could be quite difficult. How fast do you really have to be if you're running from that bear? If we are all running, I'm looking for a certain answer. If we are all running, how fast do you need to be? No need to run. I'm keen to hear from Otman to hear how that would work. No need to run. Now this is an interesting answer. This is what I was looking for. Faster than the slowest. Now that's actually what I was looking for. And I want to talk a little bit about that in the context. So yeah, so the virtual chocolate will go to the first person who answered, but the answer I was looking for, so Azim, congratulations. But the answer I was looking for was faster than the slowest, because the thing is, if an organization, in the past, I should say, if an organization was responding better than competitors or other organizations in their industry or other government departments, for example, in the same country, if there's a major large-scale incident like a flood or a pandemic or something really big like a cyber attack on a whole country, and you're responding better than others, like you're running a little bit faster than the slowest, in the past that was good enough. That people would go, oh great, wow, you've responded so well and we're proud of you, and as a customer I'm still loyal to you because you did quite well there. So faster than the slowest used to be good enough. Now the other thing is, it's usually in context of a larger scale disaster where other people hear about what's happening, like, oh, in the news there may be that there's flooding in Brunei, and therefore everybody has some sort of compassion if you're doing quite well or faster than the slowest. and if you're recovering quicker than other organizations in your industry. But what I've noticed over the last 8 to 10 years is customers and other people in the industry are getting more smart about what options did you have to be prepared for that for that disaster. So what you find is organizations actually now finding more and more pressure to be perfect, to be faster than that bear, because customers are going, well, okay, so you're down and you're blaming it on the bear that you're now, trying to recover your IT systems, for example, and the bear in that case might be, I don't know, a major power failure in a city. But if they now hear that, they will go, well, what's your backup? What's your backup generator power? What's your backup IT systems? What's your backup air conditioning systems? So it's not valid anymore to hide behind that and to say, oh, we're doing quite good because we're faster than our competitors, or other government departments there. So hopefully this analogy made sense. It's in the past running faster than the other people, the was good enough, but now it's actually, I guess, faster than the bear is becoming the answer. So all of you out there who answered in the chat are actually correct. All right, now this is also an interesting one. I'm just going to check time as well. We've got about 10 minutes before we have a coffee break. So ultimately, if something happens, you want to be the one that comes out flying or shiny. And we see there's quite a few organizations out there who have been able to do that. So when we are all thinking about Mars as a chocolate bar, of course, I love chocolate, so that's the first example there. What I'd like to highlight is a particular incident that happened to Mars, and it was a product recall. So they had to recall all their products because there was one tiny little piece of plastic found in one Mars bar, and all those hundreds of thousands, millions of Mars bars in the end had to be recalled because the risk of that actually, being one of those Mars bars. So that's one example. The next, what I wanted to say is what they did in that particular situation is they had a great response. They actually made sure that customers, after recalling the product, actually felt safe again to buy the product. So in this case, Mars did really, really well, and they made sure that their reputation was managed, etc. Now, Nudie Juice is a juice manufacturer that had some problems with fire in their factory, and they actually benefited from that particular incident as well in a big way, because they made sure their continuity provision was really quickly up on its feet. They were reproducing the product very quickly again, and they were applauded by the population, and they actually came in the news, the fact that they had such a good business continuity plan, and they got all this free publicity around it. Now, the next one there is the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and you can see a very cheeky, it's not rude, but in people's heads, it's like, wow, what's that word? That's a different word from KFC, right? So they made a word there to actually say that they're sorry because one day they didn't have chicken in the stores. And that was a major business continuity event that happened because their transport supplier was not ready for the volume that they were supposed to deliver to all the different KFC stores, the chicken shops. And so they had to deal with that continuity event as well. And they made a major news campaign. And because they used so much humor in it, something funny that people talked about, they actually recovered very quickly from that incident. Now, I'm going to recover from a quick incident too, and that is I need to plug in my power cord, which is the one thing I forgot this morning. So please bear with me for 1 second. I'm just going to get that happening. So that was a quick business continuity strategy activated on the spot. So the next picture there, now that's intriguing, isn't it? That is hand sanitizer, but it looks like a bottle of gin or something, right? Like alcohol. Now, the situation was with COVID-19, a lot of businesses and a lot of population needed sanitizers, right? And they were very hard to get at some point. Now, many businesses that have just started to get into business, for example, in the alcohol sector, which, you know, I know in Brunei is actually probably a complete non-strategy because alcohol is not very common in Brunei, right? But this particular strategy that those companies that had the ability to produce alcohol, they changed that to actually produce hand sanitizer, which also includes alcohol, right? So very interestingly, that actually helped a lot of smaller businesses to continue their production and actually become quite quickly very successful. And yeah, I hope that made sense, you know. So, and then the last picture there of a successful business continuity philosophy, I should say. And I hope that some of you who read Mandarin, and please type away in the chat, who read Mandarin can actually confirm what I'm about to say. So the word crisis in Mandarin, the symbol actually has two elements, which is danger and opportunity. Is that pretty much correct? I'm looking at the chat if someone is answering. And if one of you actually speaks Mandarin or writes Mandarin. But yeah, this is really an interesting philosophy, because if you embrace crises and see that there's always a flip side to it, that there's always a benefit in a crisis, you know, that's the danger and the opportunity in there, that's actually really useful. And you could see with some of these examples on the screen, that's actually what happened. Well, in fact, all of them. Even Mars bars, you know, they actually reported 15 to 20% increase in sales after that successful recall and after that successful communication campaign around it. So sometimes a bad thing turns into a very good thing, you know, for how shall I say, for organizations that are under a lot of pressure and who are finding themselves in an incident, a critical event, and actually use that as an opportunity to come out, what I would say, flying, you know, and as with flying colors. So I can see a question in the chat there. I'm not sure if that was about the Mandarin symbol that Marion was asking as well. Yeah, I'd really like to know, because this is what I've been informed, you know, that it means. But I wanted to get some view of anyone who does speak Mandarin to say if this is correct. And you can just do that later on if you like as well. It doesn't have to be straight away. Ah, Mohammed Azim, you can't seem to select all participants. All right, I'll leave that with Marianne to look into in the break when we have our break time. So I'll continue for a little bit more, and then we'll resolve some of these issues that you had highlighted there. Okay, so that was my introductory part, as you can see. The part where we talked a little bit about history and standards we've covered, and also some of the practical examples. Now, an icebreaker exercise that I've developed, I'm going to open that up for all of you. I'm going to send you a link in the chat where you can access that particular exercise, and I'll do that in a minute. Now, what I'd like to show you here is the overall program for the next 2 days. So we've covered the introduction now. We're going to continue after our coffee break also with the business continuity objectives, which is step 1 of my process that I will share with you. There'll be some group discussions between each of those elements there. And then step 2 is the risk management. That's the step where we look at certain things that can go wrong and how do you deal with managing that particular step. There'll be a video exercise in there as well, which I mentioned earlier, which is related to flooding as an event, and we'll share that through the screen as well. The next slide shows our afternoon schedule. So that's step 3 and step 4 of the framework that I'm sharing with you. The step 3 is all about what people should you include in your organization in business continuity as a process. And then step 4 is about time-critical business processes. So that's actually looking at which activities in your business should continue no matter what happens. And somewhere in there, in the afternoon, we're going to play a virtual board game, which is how to build business continuity teams. And I've got a digital version of that, which we'll do in subgroups. So I look forward to seeing all your results for that, and also for you guys to help each other. What I would suggest with some of the games, to actually that you guys are teamed up with non-colleagues, and for other games that you will find some colleagues in your group as well. Sometimes it's nice to hear from other people and to learn from others in a different industry as well. So I'll be able to group you guys with that in mind, okay? All right, so in the late afternoon, we're going to work a little bit more with a handout that I'll be giving you, and also a business impact analysis type template, which is the last topic for today. And there'll be some interactive exercises there. Now, tomorrow, we're going to step through the step 6, 7, and 8 in the morning, which is all about business continuity provisions, activating the business continuity plans, and testing exercises, training, and awareness. And some of these will come with handouts that you can use in the days and years to come, that you can use for your own business. And yeah, we'll be sharing them through various mechanisms in the course. And then tomorrow afternoon is all about some practical exercises and looking a little bit more at group discussions around how to go forward with the information that you received. And also it will touch on our comeback session, which we will have in 1 month, which is actually, how shall I say, it's a recap, a short session where we all get back together and where we can share if we've learned something or if we're using some of the templates. And especially the new people here, you can ask some further questions from the group. So it's more like a sort of a semi-networking session where I'll facilitate that with all of you. And I look forward to hearing what you actually have been able to do with this course, because for me, it's important to present things that actually are of value to people and to be able to see you actually grab that information and do something with it. So that's going to be a month after the course. And the last point we're going to talk about is the networking when the lockdown is over, because Zenit has kindly volunteered to come, well, to basically organize something for all of you where we can all actually be physically together and actually enjoy a coffee and have some further chats. So that's hopefully going to be as soon as possible, hopefully next year or something. And yeah, we're not sure, of course, with COVID-19, but we'll see what happens and when we can do that. So that's our program for this workshop. Now, I'm looking at the time. I think it's probably a good time to have a stretch break. Can I get you guys all to come back in 15 minutes? So we're going to start the exercise, the icebreaker exercise, a little bit later than planned, but I think that's going to be fine. Some of the other later steps we can do in a more efficient way quite easily. So what I'd like to do is now take a 15-minute break. So please come back at 10:45. And in the meantime, I'm going to prepare that interactive whiteboard exercise for all of you, and also to set up some subgroups for breakout sessions later on. So without further ado, let's take that break. I'll just check in the chat if there's any questions from anyone before we go on that break. Yeah, so I think that's fine. 10:45, can we all come back, take a bit of a stretch, do what you need to do, coffee or something, grab some chocolate, very important as well. And I know Brunei has one of the best chocolates that I've actually been able to enjoy in my entire life. I'll tell you about that story later on. Yeah, I hope everything's okay. And I hear some of you responding. Be back in 15 minutes. Excellent. So we'll take a 15-minute break and we'll see you back. Thank you very much. Minutes, and we'll be getting back to the session. I see a few people are still away, so let's see. Oh no, I can see everyone's online. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so 1 more minute and we will get started. All right, everybody ready again to get started? We now have the ability to all chat to everybody, so that's very useful. And you're most welcome to give that a try if you want to type something in there, see if we can all see it. If any of the participants want to just say hi or something, see if that works. If you can now select all participants in that little box. Testing, testing, test. Great. Thanks, everyone. All right, I think it's time to get restarted. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I'd like to do a interactive exercise. I'm first going to share my desktop so that you can see the actual exercise. And then I will give you access to manipulate the same board. So I am now showing a particular screen. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, explain how this exercise will work and then set you guys all up with a particular color. So what you see here, this is basically a digital version of a whiteboard sticky note exercise. And what the application is called Mural. It's a pretty advanced tool that we use these days for this kind of presentation and interactive exercises. So over here in the middle, I've created a board which I would like to use for an exercise that we call the Learnings and Insights from COVID-19. Now, all of you have mentioned a little bit about what happened for your organization, or how were you able to cope, or how were you, struggling with that. And so what I'd like to do is categorize that in a couple of different segments. So what went well, and then what didn't go so well, and maybe some actions that your organization took out of it to change their business as usual. So, for example, some organizations have now implemented a policy where staff can work from home, substantial time of the week, or where staff will always be seated more far away from each other in the office. Or they've changed their policy around, I don't know if you use agile, hot desking, some organizations have changed that. And not just for COVID, but actually forever, So that's that third column there that you can see is the actions that your organization may have taken to actually change the normal day-to-day business. So each of you will have 10 sticky notes to populate if you like. If you do a few less, that's not a problem, but we're just try and aim for 10. And what I've created there is you can see different colors on the left-hand side of the screen. That's the sets of 10 sticky notes. They all have a different color, at least a slightly different color. And then on the right-hand side, you can see I've put one color, one sticky note in each color. And what we'll do there, I'll do it on the screen now. Or actually, how can we do that? Maybe you can actually do that yourself. So basically, grab one of these sticky notes and write your name in there, your first name, as soon as I give you the link to this interactive whiteboard. So how it works to see the entire board, that's kind of the default setting. When you first open it, you'll see the entire board. And now you know how the layout is, right? On the left, I've put all the sticky notes as a bit of a dump. And then on the right-hand side, you see the legend, which will ideally have in there the name of each person. So, for example, let me set one up, and then you guys can do that for the rest of the group yourself. I'm now zooming in the board. I am moving, I'm not moving the right bit. I will, just give me 1 second. So as you can see, you can move everything around. You can move the sticky notes around as well. I hope you guys can all see what I'm doing here. And at this point, you don't have access to do it yourself, but I'm just demonstrating how it works, yeah? So you can also move sticky notes this way by using that little symbol here. Now, what I'd like to do is zoom into this section here. And in each sticky note, I'll do one of them, like I said. If you guys can all grab one color and allocate that color to yourself by double-clicking in that sticky note and then writing your first name in there. So I'll put in there Alia and maybe Firdaus as well. Now, this is fairly small text, but that's kind of useful for the rest of the sticky notes when you want to type some thoughts, you know, some further comments, because we need that space. But for this set of sticky notes, which is our legend, so for that one, I will create the font a little bit bigger. Yeah, I'm just doing that by pressing this button here. And you can see that that's now a little bit bigger and visible. So when you first get access to this whiteboard, what I'd like you to do is go over to the right-hand section and actually allocate a particular color to yourself. Now, other people will see you typing, yeah? So be quick and just start typing, and that will be yours then. And you'll probably clash a little bit with each other, but I'm sure that you'll work it out so that at the end, in a minute or so, you all will have at least one of these colors allocated to yourself. And then what you would do is move over to the other side by grabbing the area here. Oh, sorry, that was a whole sticky note I created. By grabbing this area, the gray area, and moving that to another side. Yeah, you can do that by this as well. And then going to your particular section. So you might want to set it up in this kind of way, where you can see your sticky notes and where you can see the rest of the board. And for example, you will type in something in a particular one. So let's say that my color that was for example, for Alia. So Alia was light gray, so she would grab one of these sticky notes and then drag it with your mouse to the board. And what I'd like you to do in there is then double click and then double click in there and then type something. So for example, we're now in the section what went well. So Alia, maybe you can type something in there like we collaborated well together in our organization, you know. So you might want to type that note in there. And once again, you can always zoom in to what you're doing here. So you could do that this way, yeah, where you zoom in with that little section on the bottom right, which is always visible. Yeah, so you can actually do that yourself as well whilst you're working on this board. And yeah, and other people can only see those sticky notes. So their own view, all of you will have a different view in terms of how much you're zoomed in. So Alia would put that here, for example, in what went well. And Firdaus might want to do the same. I think I gave Firdaus the purple color. That is, yeah, that's a light purple. So he might want to go in there and say, okay, purple, I think I'm going to put that in the section about what didn't go so well. And if you double click in there, Firdaus can start typing something like, we didn't have headsets at home or something. Or yeah, headsets at home. So we were sent home to work from home, but we didn't have headsets, so that made it a bit difficult to do. So this is what I'd like you to do. So place those sticky notes in the right area, yeah, by this particular means. And this is our first practice round with this tool. There'll be exercises later on during the program, but this is the first one where it's a little bit flexible. You can't really do anything wrong, even if you move everything around, we'll be able to fix it. Yeah, so don't be too scared to get into the action. So all these little sticky notes can go somewhere, and please give that a go. I'm going to give you guys probably about 15 to 20 minutes to populate that. And the good part is we can all see each other's sticky notes, right? So we'll all be able to see some of the things that other people have said, what it looks like, and to get inspired about those comments. And now I'm going to just change a little bit the outline of this white one so that it becomes visible on the white background. That's now done. So we're ready basically to get started. I'm going to send in the chat right now. I'm going to send you a link which will make you a visitor to this board where you can start populating and start typing away, okay? So the first thing to do is move to the right-hand side of that screen to put your name in one of the colors, and then move over to the left to start using those sticky notes. Okay, now let's go to the chat. I'm going to, what does action mean? Thank you for asking, and clearly that's working now that we can all read your question. Action means something that your organization has done to change their daily business. So what actions have come out of COVID-19 that have actually now changed the new business as usual, I should say. Yeah, is that, Karima Notman, is that sounding clear? So first column is what went well. Second column is what didn't go so well during this whole COVID-19. And the third one, what substantial changes have your organization made? Great. So that sounds like that's all clear now. So here's the link. So when you click on that link, you will be directed to the mural board. And if you then want to go back to our WebEx session, you'll have to float your mouse up to the top and you'll see the icons to actually go back to the WebEx session, or to the bottom of your screen where you can see that session open. Okay, so let's get started. We will still be able to hear each other as well. So if you have any major disasters or something, just unmute yourself and say something. Or if you can't get back to the chat, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so just use then the unmute button and explain what's going on, and we'll be able to help you with that. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to send you the link. I'll be looking at the whiteboard myself to see what you guys are creating and if you're all on the right track. And I look forward to seeing some of the thoughts and sharings. So here is that link. So please click on it. You could also have a double flick screens or something, but usually for this particular link, it's nice to have the full screen because you can see then all the different sticky notes that are coming. I can already see quite a few of you, and some of you have not given yourself a real name. There's a lot of little icons that give special names. You can actually edit your own name. You can put in Alia, for example, or Shazwan. I can see you guys are doing that already. So first move to the right-hand side of the screen and pick a color. Double click in there and actually put your name. Very good. I can see Shazwan doing that already. You're going over to that side of the screen. Amirul, fantastic. You guys are picking your favorite color. Now that particular one with your name on it, please leave it there. So that's our legend. And then when you click in the big dark gray area of the screen behind, you can then move the screen view to something else. Yeah, so use the gray black area at the back of the screen to move your views around. You guys are getting a hang of it, I can see. Because I could see some things moving and now they've stopped moving, so that means you guys are all getting a bit of a feel for it. So please type in your name in there. And I will increase the font size of these notes a little bit so we can all see that quite clearly as well. So the note with your name on it, please leave it in the legend area on the right. and then use the sticky notes on the left-hand side of the screen. So once you put your name, you don't have to go to the right-hand side of the screen anymore. You can just stay on the left-hand side where you see all the sticky notes. You guys are doing great. I can see this is starting to look like a real whiteboard. And if it's not super neat and organized, that's not a problem. Okay. I'm continuing to share my screen for those who are having trouble with security. And that's in this case Azim. In this case, please enjoy just watching the session and seeing what others have created. And please put your own learnings in the chat. Okay, so please go ahead and type in there if you've got any particular thoughts on what went well or what didn't go so well. I can see the entire board is being moved sometimes, but that's a common problem. But you guys are getting your head around it quite well there. Siti and Azim, if you want to just share in the chat, that's fine. I'll read that out to everyone later on as well. And I hope for those who are not able to put the sticky notes on that you're enjoying watching this whole exercise evolve. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more onto the board itself on my screen, so those who are seeing my screen share, they can read some of the sticky notes as well. And later on we'll zoom in more to read them too. So. We've got about 10 more minutes. Please keep typing away in there. It's really fantastic what you guys are doing here. So I can see a lot of different thoughts there. And even after this 10-minute exercise, we will have that board available to all of you, also during the lunch break, etc. So to be able to, well, to read back what others have said, but also, you know, what you want to, what you want to add even later on. So we can save this as a real artifact that came out of this training course, where you can see what others have done, and especially the third column, you know, how other organizations are changing their day-to-day business. I can say, whilst you guys are working there, I can say Ural, like this tool, and WebEx, you know, and other tools have actually really changed my little business as well. I've got a consultancy business, of course, with consultants all over the world, and we're really using these tools now. So that's not just for COVID. I mean, this is going to be forever that we're going to be using these enhanced tools. I can see you guys are also now getting the hang of changing the size of the sticky notes. You can drag them a bit bigger if you've got a lot of text. You can change the font size if you like, you know, so it's a very easy to use interactive tool. And it's nice to be able to use it in parallel to some of the other interactive tools that we're using right now with WebEx, for example, you know, that you can actually use this one too. So you've got about 5 or 6 more minutes. I'm going to leave you for a moment, and I'll just grab a glass of water, and we'll recap in 5 minutes. So please keep firing away with those sticky notes. It's looking fantastic there, and we'll go through that material in, you know, in 5 to 7 more minutes. Thanks. Okay, everybody. I can still see a few people typing away there. Fantastic. What a great effort. Let's say 1 more minute, and then we'll share what is in the chat as well as what's on the board. I'll run through all the comments there. I hope you're enjoying this way of working. All right, I'll start sharing. Whilst I do that, you can still add things to it if you like. That's no problem at all. So let me just move this screen around a little bit. Yeah, just making sure I'm visible. All right. So what we've got in the chat here is we've got here some actions. Developing work from home guidelines. Yeah, very important. A lot of organizations started to do that because of COVID-19. They didn't really have a guideline before because it was just sporadically happening that people were working from home. I can see here working from home went well for quite a few organizations, and weekly staff rotations, office social distancing, and collaboration with other vendors in the building. That's very good to hear. Implementing health screening via QR code upon entering the office. What a great initiative that is. Yeah, that's really smart. So that was one of the went wells. Didn't go so well was delayed verification process of members coming to pay and register for applications. Yeah, I've heard that from many businesses actually, the whole getting online with the right tools. Actions for verifications through video calls and email. Yeah, so using video calls and emails for verification activity. Also SMS, I've heard people say, so that sort of thing. What didn't go so well? Unable to access into the system from home. Achieving KPIs, no internet connection. Yeah, certain regions that would be the case, especially for home remote workers who work in who live in areas with not so good coverage. And then an action there shared by City is also focus on offline tasks and development of soft skills, create monitoring lists and daily journal, frequent meeting via Teams and Zoom. Yeah, I've heard that as well. People who, some of the workforce tended to be overly busy and other parts of the workforce maybe less busy and using that time to do skill development, soft skill development as well, as you said. So that's great, and thanks for sharing that in the chat. So let's have a look at the board. It's pretty big, and there's a lot of comments on there. You guys have done an absolutely fantastic job. Let me grab the setting for that. Just 1 second, just jump back to Mural. Here it is. Okay, using my Zoom. There we go. Okay, so the board has got a lovely new color. That tends to happen sometimes. There, what we see in there on the what went well, let me zoom into that again. So that's over here. And I'm just doing this on my screen share, okay? So you can do this yourself too if you want to keep working and if you want to keep looking on the actual application of Mural, or you can flick back to WebEx, whatever you prefer. So what went well? We collaborated well together. We managed, well, that was my example note. We managed to come up with an alternate site for our staff, despite having it on a very last minute, making standard operating procedure for broadcasting, guided by MRH. Staff are adapting well. We see, just 1 moment, excuse me. Excuse me again, just have a read of these notes you can see there. Okay, I think I've recuperated. I hope you're enjoying reading some of these comments. Yeah, very common one. I'm reading a little bit about decision making that some of you have shared. You know, like people were not really prepared for this. They normally have meetings with each other. They make decisions based on that, and now it all had to be remote. And a few things around VPN access. And in the actions, you can see a standard operating procedure to ensure broadcasting are carried out. So that was, of course, for Brunei TV. Let me move into these small notes here. Departments are now very keen to update their BCP-related documents due to experience that they've had recently. Well, that's absolutely fantastic news, because that's what we try to do, you know, with in business continuity, that we try to pass the message to other staff and to say, look, this is important, we need to make plans. And many people are now very aware of that. Yeah, use different branches for walk-in customers. That's a good idea as well. Internet bandwidth was increased. BCP developed and updated from time to time, and more use of online platforms. So that's some of the comments here. So this is our huge whiteboard that we created. You guys have done a really, really great job. So thank you for doing that. Let me just see what I can do here. I will make a save of this and make sure that we can use this even over the days to come, just to refer back to, etc. So we'll leave this now, but yeah, great effort once again, guys. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed that exercise and that it was enlightening to use a different tool for it. So as I said, we'll continue on with our program for now. I will just move this away and also this. I can see another comment in here with the went well. Sanitization of public coming to branches, weekly office disinfection. Yeah. Just adding it on. Fantastic. Yeah, and I know it's kind of a, I don't know, it's a bit of an addictive tool, you know, people go in there and then they don't want to get out anymore. But just for those who are in the mural board, I've now switched back to the PowerPoint presentation. So please come back to the WebEx session. You can close the screen of mural and it won't affect anything. We can come back to it any time. It's saved in the cloud, you know, so it's not going to be yeah, it's not going to be affected if you flick back. So yeah, and the rearranging and with the post-its, etc. I'll make sure that gets done. We make it a little bit neater and we can share it later on. So thanks again. Then continuing on with the PowerPoint presentation, look, there's going to be quite a lot of handouts that I've offered for this particular program to Zenit and to the actual, well, to the organizers for you guys to use. And that's normally not always the case. So it's basically some of these elements that I'm sharing, the templates for business continuity planning, for BIA, etc. They're normally commercial products. So normally organizations buy them from us and they will then use it for their organization. What I've done with this particular course is, especially with all your challenges, with you guys sticking with the process and actually staying with this interactive learning method, we want to somehow, well, how should I say, thank you for that. And so I've offered to include some